My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Portage County TEA Party. I'm also the past President of the Ohio Liberty Coalition, which is why these questions are here, because I was the person that dealt with that. We're going to start our presentation now about the IRS targeting and the Verizon phone tracking and the NSA surveillance and all that, and what we can do about it. So basically, the issue for us is, this conflict is now taking place because government has moved into this social space and is driving religion out of our society. But the problem with that is our founders told us that you could not have a representative form of government if you weren't a moral people. In other words, you can't have a representative form of government if we elect Hank here to go to Congress and he's a liar. Well, what's the point? He can tell me anything and go do whatever he wants. In other words, we're a values-based society. And our founders knew that if you didn't have that balance between values and politics, that you would fail. And that's why I think we're in essence failing as a nation, because we've gotten away from that. And the evidence is mounting, and so on this sheet you saw questions. I hope you've had a chance to read these questions and the little comments in the box about what the IRS was asking of the Ohio Liberty Coalition. But I thought I'd give you a couple of the better or worse questions that actually were asked by the IRS. These are sample questions that are real. The Fremont Tea Party in Ohio, on their 1024 application, was asked what activities you participate in as a group. And one of the things you would put down is, we have meetings like this, all right? Well, they put down that they had a book club, and they read the Constitution and the 5,000-year lead and some of that. So the IRS wrote to them in their official letter and demanded to know what books has your book club read, and give us a book report on all of them. And I can't make that up. That's literally what they said. And they would not give them their tax-exempt status unless they gave them that book report. And Marion Bowers from Fremont, who's just like a lot of you, a very tough woman, she wrapped up all the books in a package and sent them to them and said, read them yourself. Okay? That's the Tea Party spirit, right? Individualism. So that works. When I was in Washington for the first hearing on the IRS targeting with the House Ways and Means Committee, this next question really took this to a new level for me. Because of my involvement with this from the very beginning, and some of you have seen that I've been quoted a lot in the media, and I've been around on this IRS issue. And for those of you who are not members of our group who just came to learn about this, the reason for that is that as President of the Ohio Liberty Coalition, I was the first person to stand up and say to the IRS, we will not comply. And I did that in February of 2012, February 16th. I wrote that letter. And what happened from that letter was that we got some media out of that, and we started some congressional investigations, which have paid off. But we also had groups from all over the country calling me personally and saying, you thought your questions were bad, you should see ours. Okay, so we ended up having national conference calls where there'd be 100-some people on talking about the problems. So the reason I was quoted so much in the media is because I actually had more information than pretty much anyone else in the country about the questions, who was being asked, what was going on. But I just wasn't ready for this question, because when we were sitting there in the House Ways and Means Committee, and the congressman from Illinois talked about the Coalition for Life in Iowa, where the IRS actually wrote on their stationery the question, tell us what your members pray for. Now, we just had the doctor talk about balance and religious freedom, and you shall never be prejudiced against for your beliefs. So what in blazes is the federal government asking you what you pray for? That's just off the charts. But they asked it. They asked it. I thought this was also a very creative question. Give us the names of all current and former officers and board members, and the names of their family members, and tell us if they have ever held public office or if they intend to do so. So when I'm Karnak the Magnificent, I'm going to say, you're running for Congress in 10 years. They literally asked that question. And so that, combined with ones like print out every page of your website and Facebook page, is what really made it clear to me that this targeting had nothing to do with our tax-exempt status. It had nothing even to do with the rules, which some of the Democratic talking points have been, well, the IRS had to ask these questions because it's just unclear where the line is about what's politicking and what's not. That's just an outright lie. If it wasn't a lie, why would the Portage County Tea Party have a PAC? If we didn't know what was politics and what wasn't, why wouldn't we have just stayed a 501c4 and never started our PAC, which we had to get lawyers, it costs money to do that, we had to do reports to Secretary of State. The reason is because we knew where the lines were, and when we wanted to do our own endorsements, and we wanted to run radio ads, that's called electioneering, that meant that we were now doing political activity, and we couldn't do it in the Portage County Tea Party, we needed to form a PAC. So that line of defense of the IRS is totally bogus, and is intended to mislead you. So as you know, I said it was February of last year when we said we would not comply. And some of you may remember reading or hearing about the fact that I have had 2 major newspaper reporters call me and apologize to me because they did not report the story in February of 2012 and March of 2012 and April of 2012 when I was trying to give them this very same information that you hold in your hands. You'll notice it says 2012 on this thing, who will you vote for in the 2012 election? That's because this piece of paper was in the hands of the media over a year ago. And the reason that they did not act was because the administration was using this to win the election. It's just that simple. This was done purely for political reasons. And no one will ever convince me differently, and I'm pretty confident that we're going to find the truth. We're going to find the truth, and we're going to prove that point. But you can take my word for it for now. After fighting for nearly 2.5 years, the IRS finally apologized. As you can see the big story here, the IRS finally apologized. But do not be mistaken. They didn't apologize because they were sorry. Right? You think they were sorry that they did this? No. Yeah, I don't think so, okay? They were apologizing because our Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan and Darrell Issa had been on their tails since February of 2012. And that they were the ones who got the Treasury Department to have the Inspector General investigate. And that Treasury Department investigation was about to be published, and so they came out ahead of the story, okay, and concocted this BS about a couple of people in Cincinnati dreamed this all up. So they weren't sorry, they just were trying to cover their tracks. So, since this happened, virtually no one's been held accountable. Not a soul. I mean, this Lois Lerner, who was the head of the tax-exempt organization for the IRS, Miss Lerner, is the one who pled the fifth in front of Congress, okay, even though she didn't actually do that. She stated her statement that voided her ability to do the fifth. But she has been put on administrative leave, okay? So now, got paid leave, okay? So now we're paying her not to work. Before we were paying her and she didn't work. So what's the difference? Okay, but that's really frightening, and I don't know if any of you picked up the story that came out a little bit about a week ago, but we found out, a story broke, I was actually on Cavuto talking about it, I think it was a week ago today, I was talking with Neil Cavuto about the fact that Lois Lerner, even though she's been put on this leave, she still is accessing the IRS computers and still has the ability to look at our tax records, okay? It's like the Keystone Cops. It just never ends. So, I don't know how many of you got to see this. I was going to try to play this, but I couldn't download it on my computer, and the internet's not good enough here. But you need to go on internet, on YouTube, and look up Congressman Jim Jordan's interview with the FBI Director Robert Mueller that happened like last Thursday, and you will be absolutely appalled. I mean, this guy... let me just give it to you this way, all right? In our lives, we're accountable. We have to do what our bosses say. We have to do what's the right thing to do. So the Congress calls the FBI director to testify in front of them about this IRS scandal. And Jim Jordan dares to ask this guy, how many agents, it's been 6 weeks now since this investigation by the FBI started, how many agents do you have assigned to the case? And he said he doesn't know. Jim Jordan said, can you tell me the name of the lead agent? Who's in charge? And he said, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you. Okay? Now, it would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. It would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. But from the former IRS director Schulman, who, when he was asked about why, how often he went to the White House, and he had gone 150 some times, the only reason he could think of was for the Easter egg hunt. Right? You see that? And how many times has Eric Holder from Fast and Furious through the FBI and the Fox News guy testified in front of Congress and flat out lied? He's flat out lied. What you need to be concerned about, what you really need to understand this is truly a constitutional crisis. We are on the brink of the collapse of our government, because a cornerstone to our government is separation of powers. Right? You've got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. But when you see those administration officials testifying in front of Congress, what do you see? I see contempt. Right? I see them looking at those congressmen and saying, you can't touch me. I'll do whatever I want. You cannot touch me.
Plead the fifth.
Okay? And that's a constitutional crisis, because it is Congress's job to oversee these groups. Okay? That's why they're testifying in front of House Ways and Means and the committee that Isa and Jordan are part of. Because they actually have legal control over the IRS. But that's like you going to see your boss and just say, I don't care what you think, you can't make me do it. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is the messaging we're going to give to our congressmen about this and how to change it, because it's really critical at this stage that they defend the Constitution and, quite frankly, defend their own pride. Who are they? So as much as the government has tried to say to us, oh, it's just a mistake, it's just, 2 employees in Cincinnati dreamed us up, nobody above us knew anything, blah, blah, blah. The Fox News poll from last week basically shows nobody's buying it. 66% believe that government targeted conservative groups to punish political opponents. That means us. That means the people sitting in this room. We are, to our government, the enemy. 23% believe it was a mistake by lower-level employees, right? The low information voters that Rush talks about, who are going to believe whatever they're told. And 11% don't know, and that's just as frightening. What do you mean you don't know? Make up your mind, stand up. More frightening, 28% believe the White House was directly involved. 40% believe the White House knew about it, even if they weren't directly involved. And 12% believe that targeting was done by IRS employees. So 68% of the people in this country believe that our White House, now again, these aren't just Tea Party people. This isn't a survey of Tea Party people. This is a survey of Republicans. Okay, 88% of Republicans think the White House knew. All right, independents, 60-some% think that the White House knew. But even a majority of Democrats believe this. That's a constitutional crisis. Because you cannot function. I can't function as the father of my family if my children and my wife don't trust me. You can't either. I can't function as the CEO of my company if you don't trust me, if our employees don't trust me and I don't trust them. And so why would you trust this government when they just keep coming with all these falsehoods? So the question for all of us is, why does this IRS targeting affect you? And I think some of you are here tonight because you figured out that if they can do this to us, what makes you think they can't do it to you? Right? So this is a universal thing. This is really important. This is something that we're all involved in. All Americans. I don't care if you're liberal, you're the Green Party, you're environmentalist, you work for a union. I don't care. This affects us all. The next part that has got to be totally frightening to you is that the IRS will play a major role in the enforcement of ObamaCare starting next year. How many of you are aware of that? Show your hands. How many know that? Okay? You know that. If that doesn't frighten you, I don't know what will. But it gets worse because the person who was in charge of the IRS tax-exempt unit is now in charge of the IRS division that will start to enforce Obamacare. Her name is Sarah Hall Ingram, and they have promoted her to the healthcare unit. What do you think she's going to do there? You think she can just change and say, I learned my lesson from the IRS and we're not going to do that anymore? Or do you think she's going to do more of the same? Okay, double down. That's exactly right. So I asked FreedomWorks, and I think you've got a copy of this in your package you picked up on your way in. You know, FreedomWorks put together a nice sheet that said why the IRS should not be in charge of Obamacare. And I think as you read through this, you'll see that there's some pretty good reasons for that. But I just think that, the more important reason for you to understand is that if they're in charge of Obamacare and they're looking at your financial records and comparing them with your medical records, does it seem unlikely to you that when you need that hip replacement, that you're just not going to get that letter in the mail for 2 years because you're part of the Tea Party? Or you belong to the wrong church? Or how about you were a Boy Scout leader and we're mad because those Boy Scouts won't allow homosexual leaders? Do you think it's plausible that your health care will be affected? I don't think it's just plausible. I think it's a fact.
There's no doubt.
I think there's no doubt about it. That's what's going to happen. So like I said, you have the IRS issue, and you got to remember, if there was Fast and Furious, then there was Benghazi, then there was the IRS issue, and then, we have this gentleman who, 29-year-old person, has total access to all of our phone records, right? And, the government is tracking Verizon's, customer records. And people say, where'd they get permission to do this? Where did they get permission to do this? So the administration came out immediately and said, listen, the Bush administration did this. We've been doing this for years. It's for the safety of citizens, okay? And we're allowed to do this. And by the way, we're not listening to your phone calls, right? We're just tracking your telephone metadata, right? Isn't that what they said? So, and Rush has been giving all these examples about, which phone calls you make tell a lot about what you're doing, right? But here's the point. We started this conversation by saying you can't be a representative form of government if you don't have the integrity, if you don't have values, if you don't tell the truth. So what happened this weekend? This weekend, they had a meeting, they did a briefing, the NSA did a briefing with Congress and with the Senate to show them that this surveillance on the average American was critical because it was helping to stop terrorist threats, right? And what came out at this meeting? After they said to us repeatedly through the whole week, we're not listening to your phone calls, what does it say? That thousands of analysts can listen to domestic phone calls. They lied. They outright lied. And and President Obama can go to Ohio State and tell those students not to listen to people like us who tell them not to trust the government. Right? Did he do that for commencement?
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Gordon Gee, for inviting me. We really appreciate that and enjoy your retirement. Okay? But my point is that this is not just an individual incident. This is a record. And a record that, for those of us who are old enough to remember Nixon, I think Rush was talking about this on his show. The stuff that this administration is doing is completely over the top compared to what Nixon got impeached for. Completely over the top. Nixon got impeached for a 2-bit burglary and for lying about what happened. He wasn't spying on 100 million Americans. He wasn't using that information to target groups and to keep them from exercising their political freedom of speech and their right of assembly and their freedom of religion. So why is this important? And this is a famous quote, from Benjamin Franklin in 1775. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Now, this has been the debate in the last week, so I want to show of hands. How many of you people believe that how many of you want to trade your supposed safety for your freedom of speech and freedom of liberty and freedom of assembly? Raise your hand. I don't see any hands. So how come our congressmen are all coming out today and talking about how, this is important and this is okay? Note on the slide, it says, this is not authorized by the Patriot Act. There is nothing in the Patriot Act. And we fought about the Patriot Act, didn't we? There are a lot of us had a lot of problems with the Patriot Act because it was so far-reaching, right? And what were we assured of? Throughout the last 10 years, how many times did you hear someone from the Bush administration or from the Obama administration say to you, we're not listening to U.S. citizens' calls or following them. This is all domestic, right? Do you remember that? They said that over and over and over. And they lied. This is not allowed under the First and Fourth Amendments of our Constitution. And it's not authorized by the Patriot Act. Yes, we want to be safe, right? But at what price? Over 3,000 people died on 9/11. And that is a tragedy. And that was a real bad day for our country. But you cannot convince me that because of that, 300 million of us have to give up our freedom.
Tom, there's better and more efficient ways to make us safe than listening to our phone conversations.
And I don't even believe that it's making us safe. Okay, if that were true, then what happened with the Boston guys? If it was true, what happened in Fort Hood? The fact of the matter is, what are we established tonight? Lies, 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 and lies. So why would we believe their lies about this solving terrorist threats? Would you believe that? No. Any of you guys believe that? Not a chance. You've already ruined your credibility. Why would I believe that? So the question is, what can you do about it? What can we do about it? And people keep saying to me, and I've been doing a lot of traveling, I've been speaking to a lot of Tea Party groups around the state, and a lot of people keep saying to me, somebody's got to do something about this. Somebody's got to do something about this. But I keep telling everyone that no, not somebody's got to do something about that. We have to do something about this. You and I, we have to do something about it. Right? And people say, what can I do? What can I do? Well, what did I do? I'm you guys. I'm no big shot. I'm no big deal. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not some guy that's got all kinds of resources. What did I do with the Ohio Liberty Coalition? I stood up and said, these questions are wrong, and I will not comply. Right? One guy, one short little fat Polish guy, right? Sitting in my office saying, this is wrong. And my lawyers, you think my lawyers said, that's right, Tom, you go after them. You think the lawyers said that? You think our accountants were real pleased? You think my board was excited? I had a 12-member board of the Ohio Liberty Coalition. You think they were thrilled that I was going to take on the IRS? But we did, didn't we? And so what's happened? We've won, haven't we? We beat them back. We were right. We stood on our principles. It took a year. Heck, when it happened, I was surprised it happened. I figured it'd take another 10 years. I figured it'd be, reading the book when I'm on my deathbed, and they finally admitted it. I was as shocked as anybody. But that's not a reason not to do it, is it? That's not a reason not to do it. How many of you saw my Cavuto interview last week on Fox? And what did I say in that interview? I said, I want to congratulate the person at the IRS who blew the whistle on Lois Lerner still being access to the computers there. Because that's a patriot. That's a person. That's you. That's an individual doing what's right. Because, guys, that's what we need right now. We need to do what's right. And we need to support people who do. Now, this whole thing with the NSA is a pretty interesting discussion we're having about whether this young man is a traitor or a patriot. How many of you are conflicted about that? You know, that made your mind. Raise your hands. Because it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. Because today in his statements, or in USA Today, they had a big story about there were 3 other people that tried to do the same thing, and the government squashed them like bugs. So was it right for him to stand up and say, this is wrong? You're spying? Me, a 29-year-old high school GED student, can just get on my computer and say, hey, let's listen to Tom Zawistowski's phone calls. The tragedy here is that we've got like 1.5 million people with security clearance. How insane is that? The problem is that you've got people like Lois Lerner and the Schulman character and Mueller and all these guys who are career politicians and career, quote-unquote, public servants, right? Who were never in a position where when they made a mistake, they lost their job. Who've never been under the scrutiny that you and I are under every day in our jobs. Even if you're a private business owner and you put in a new driveway and the customer doesn't like it, you got to tear it out and put in a new one, right? Because you're responsible. You're held accountable. So I saw a national security expert come up. He came up right after I was on Caputo. And they were talking to him about, well, you know, how do you keep this 29-year-old from having this information and stuff? And he said, well, they need to be supervised. They need to have people, you know, helping them. Well, my question to you is, how's that supervisor, who's never had anyone supervise them in their lives, going to supervise this kid? Right? Makes no sense. We're looking in the wrong direction. You know, when you talk about these actions by these people, and we just need good people to stand up and do the right thing. I want to give you another example that we did. Several years ago, we got out in front of the regressive left's anti-fracking agenda, didn't we? We saw the left was going to try to kill drilling in our state and in this country, and they had just succeeded in New York. And they were coming around our county and around this state with all this BS about how dangerous drilling was and how it's going to poison the water table and it's going to, you know, give you downwind syndrome, according to the lady in Suffield. Downwind syndrome. They're going to make up their own diseases, right? She literally said that in the newspaper. She has downwind syndrome. Yeah. Okay? But what did we do? We fought them, didn't we? We fought them. We fought them every inch. And then we launched the Frack Nation video campaign, didn't we? Right? We showed that movie here, and we had tea parties all over the state show that movie. And where are we today? 66% of all Ohioans believe that fracking is good. And despite any environmental dangers, the benefits far outweigh the costs. You did that. The Portage County TEA Party did that. For the whole state. So let me give you one more example. I mean, are you getting the idea that we can do something? Yes. Are you starting to understand we can do something? So let me ask a question. Anybody here have grandkids or children that are going to Catholic school? Couple? Okay, couple. All right. Well, here's a question for you. Common Core. How many in the room are familiar with Common Core? Raise your hands. Okay, quite a few. For those of you who don't know what Common Core is the education, what ObamaCare is the medicine. Bad. It's federal takeover of the curriculum from from kindergarten through graduation. It's bad. But guess what's going on? All the Catholic schools are adopting Common Core. Why? Because they're getting some money to do that. Right? I'm born and raised Catholic. Money talks in the Catholic Church. Okay? We know that. But here's the problem. Why would you pay $3,000 or $5,000 or $8,000 a year more to send your kid to Catholic school now, when they're going to be teaching Common Core to your kid, and they can get taught the same garbage Common Core in the public school? So you know what you got to do? You got to go to your pastor and say, if you adopt Common Core, I'm taking my kids out of school. And you're not going to have every parent do that. I know the Catholic Church pretty well. You get about 3 parents saying they're taking $7,000 away, and they'll be on the phone with the bishop that morning. Okay? And they'll be questioning whether they're going to get rid of Common Core. Those are real-world things you can do, okay, that you can make a difference by doing. Now, on your sheets when you came in, and I'm looking for my copy here, there is a list of citizens' action items to defend our Constitution and rights. Okay? Take a good look at this. Okay? And it says, call your congressman and ask them to rein in the NSA and the IRS. What you showed me with a show of hands tonight was that you are not willing to trade your freedom for supposed safety. Every one of you has an obligation to let every one of these congressmen and senators know how you feel. You need to call them starting tonight and going tomorrow and keep calling them and saying, I want the NSA reined in. I want the IRS reined in because I do not want to trade my liberty for safety, which you can't provide anyway. Will you do that? Will you agree to do that? Everyone is. There's the phone numbers. There's their fax number for those of you who sell fax machines. There's their email address. Most of these guys, you can't just email them now. You got to go on the web and do a form. Okay? You must let your voice be heard. The IRS question is an interesting question, isn't it? Because the IRS question really, when people asked me when I was in Washington, the media said to me, Tom, what outcome do you hope to see from this? You were right. You proved they were targeting you. They did a horrible thing. What would you like to see happen? And I thought about it and I said, well, here's the problem. I'm 58 years old. My entire life, the IRS has been used as a political tool. From Jack Kennedy to LBJ to Richard Nixon to Bill Clinton, George Bush, and Barack Obama, every single one of them has used it to attack their opponents. So what law do you think you're going to pass? Or what do you think you're going to do to stop it?
Get rid of them.
And the answer is, you got to get rid of the IRS. You got to get rid of the IRS. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. Okay? So what does that mean? What does that mean? Okay? The bottom line is on your sheet here, you'll see a thing that says learn about the fair tax. Learn about the fair tax. Because you got to understand something. Congress uses the IRS code to punish their enemies and take care of their friends by writing exemptions in for businesses in their district, etc. So they're being hypocritical when they tell you they're outraged by this, right? And then the administrations, the presidential groups come in and they use the IRS as a tool by doing audits and things. The flat tax, the fair tax, is basically a consumption tax. It moves us from an income tax to a consumption tax. And when you go to their website, they got all these videos that will answer every question you have about it. And quite frankly, until we get rid of the IRS, this will just keep happening and happening again for the rest of our lives and for the rest of all our children's lives. And guess what? With ObamaCare, it's going to get worse. So that's the next thing you can do. I've got on the screen that Rand Paul is going to try to file a class action lawsuit about this. You can go online, and the address is on your sheet, and you can sign up and tell them you agree. That's something you can do to defend our rights. Take it to the courts. Use the judicial branch. That's an important thing to do. You'll see on the bottom of your sheet it says call Governor Kasich and ask him to withdraw his support of Medicaid Expansion. And it's got his phone number. And here's 8 reasons Ohio should nix Medicaid Expansion. So you can take a look and read those 8 reasons. But I'm going to give you a couple reasons of my own. Okay? The bottom line is that Medicaid Expansion is just a bribe. That's all it is. It's $13 billion that's going to go to hospitals in Ohio who already have tax-exempt status, are already incredibly wealthy, and they're not going to give any better care than we're already giving. But here's what you need to understand, and this ties into why we have to stop Obamacare, and that'll relate to this, my last point here. Once the government, and Dr. Forte made this clear, once the government takes control of your health care, they take control of your life. What part of your life does it relate to health care? The car you drive, the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the exercise you get, anything. They can claim anything, like Mayor Bloomberg's trying to do in New York. They can claim anything. So we cannot allow Obamacare to be implemented. But here's the most important thing you need to understand. In the year 2000, 57% of all doctors in the United States were private practice physicians. 57%. At the end of last year, it was 25%. When Obamacare gets implemented, it will be 0%. And you should know things like, right now, 40% of all physicians are age 55 or over. And you know what they're telling me? They ain't working for no government. They didn't go to school for that long to be bossed around by some bureaucrat. They're going to retire. So when President Obama said to you, you can keep your doctor, yeah, except you won't be there, will they? So the bottom line is this, folks. Here's the problem with Obamacare. They're not just moving us towards Obamacare as an option. This is the equivalent of burning the boats once you reach the shore. Because once you take out all the private practice physicians, guess what? There's no going back, is there? There's no going back. So on your sheets, there is a section that says, call Speaker Batchelder and ask him to hold a vote on House Bill 91. And this may be the most important thing I'm going to say to you, and one of the most important things you can do. House Bill 91 was designed by the Cato Institute, by a guy there who is literally a genius. And what he did is he took the Obamacare law itself and uses what it authorizes to destroy it. And here's how it works. And it's simple as can be, as are all things of beauty, right? They're simple. Under Obamacare, the one thing they did is they left to the states the ability for you to regulate the insurance companies within your borders. That was fought over during Obamacare because the states liked having that power. And so they granted that in Obamacare, that you could regulate insurance companies in your state. Well, the whole engine behind Obamacare is the fact that if you're an employer and you don't meet certain standards of health care, that they can fine you, they can penalize you, like $3,200 per employee, okay, if you do not comply. That is their vehicle for making people accept Obamacare. We're going to fine you if you don't. House Bill 91 says that since we're allowed to regulate insurance companies in Ohio, our regulations are going to say that if you're an insurance company in Ohio and you offer health insurance, it is against the law for you to offer any health insurance that has a penalty attached to it. So now, you can't sell that insurance that has a penalty for that employer. If there's no penalty for the employer, why should they have their employees go into Obamacare? Why wouldn't they just keep their own insurance? Okay? Now I want to connect the dots for you so you can see why this is such an important issue. The National Republican Party's stated goal, when Paul Ryan put forward his budget in February, the federal budget, in his statement he said, this budget defunds Obamacare and we must repeal Obamacare because it will destroy our economy. Okay? I was just with Congressman Brad Weinstrup in Cincinnati a week ago. And when he made his speech, he said that he was really proud as a new congressman that he got the vote that week in Congress to repeal Obamacare, and that was the 37th time since Obamacare was passed that the Republican House has voted to repeal Obamacare. Now that's at the federal level. At the state level, we have House Bill 91, which will destroy Obamacare, sitting in committee, and our Republican administration will not bring it to a vote.
Yeah, why?
Why not? Because they're getting a whole lot of money from the hospitals and from the insurance companies. Fire them. Fire them. 14. We'll talk about 14. Right? So my point is, they're taking the money and giving up your freedom and liberty. You need to call Speaker Batchelor and demand that they bring it up for a vote. Because I'll tell you right now, they bring it up for a vote, it's going to pass. That's why they won't bring it up for a vote. So those are the things that you can do to make a difference. And you'll also see there's a link there about House Bill 91 where you can actually see a video about that and come to understand it. So, we are in dire straits. We are in dire straits because we basically are witnessing the collapse of our form of government. We're seeing the undermining of our values. We're seeing, literally our quote-unquote leaders looking us in the face through the television and lying to our face. That's literally what's going on. I'm extremely concerned. I am extremely concerned that the Republican House, through the, quote, leadership of John Boehner, is going to pass this immigration bill because their most important goal is to take immigration off the table for the 2014 and 2016 elections. To heck with the fact that it's a bad bill. To heck with the fact that it's not going to solve the problem. To heck with the fact that it's going to cost us billions of dollars. What do they care about? Their own selves, their own election. That is the challenge that we face. And that is why a lot of things are going to change between now and 14. And that is why you've got to talk to your friends and neighbors and tell them about this meeting and send them to our website and get them to sign up so they can get our emails and phone calls. Because, folks, there is nobody who's going to do anything about this but us. There is nobody but us. We must take this on ourselves. But I guarantee you we can do it. I guarantee you we're up to the job. Because we will pay the price. We will do what it takes. And we will not accept their lies. And we will stand up and say, we will not comply. And we will fight them, and them meaning anybody who stands in the way, anybody who does not support the Constitution, anybody who's a liar, anybody who has contempt for the American people. And we will drive them out. A lot of people talk about, you hear on radio shows about, going to an island in the Pacific, or I'm moving to Canada, or I'm going to Australia. My good friend Rich Youngblood, who was here earlier, I don't know if he's still here, says to me about a month ago, he said, Tom, it's time for us to stop giving up and giving them what we want to keep and make them leave. Right? We ain't leaving. They're going to leave. It's our country. They're going to leave. So your goal is to get that done. It's through every way you can. And we are here at the Portage County TEA Party going to help you do that. And I greatly appreciate your being here tonight. I hope you thought the presentation was a good one. I think it was, and I really thought, Dr. Forty did a great job. I do want to remind you about the Liberty Camp. The meeting is Wednesday here at 7 o'clock. Our fair tent, we need to get those positions filled, particularly for Garrettsville. Go back and sign up. And then I've got a special offer from one of our members named Tom Burns. And Tom's been a pretty active member, but he's having some medical issues lately. He's had a hard time. He wrote me an email today. And he said, I can't be with you tonight, and I haven't been around much. But he said, I got to go to Washington. And he's going to drive down on Wednesday. And if anybody wants to go with him, he asked me to give him his phone number and you can go with him. Okay? So You want to go to DC on Wednesday, Tom Burns is driving, and you can go with him. But that's the kind of guy he is, the kind of guy you all are. So let's make the effort, let's do the right things, and let's win this fight. Thanks for coming.